Yeah, thank you, Dr. Raju. Thank you for the warm welcome. I don't always agree with everything that Dr. Raju says, but today he said few things which are important. The first one is that we have a style of governance as a government which we want to be different from what might have been the case before, what we might have been used to. Because we believe that as a government, there is a lot of wisdom, there is a lot of knowledge, there is a lot of experience that resides outside of government, with people like yourselves. And government's job is to ensure that we provide the right environment through a process of consultation, dialogue, and ensure that people have the freedom, the confidence, and a sense of shared leadership with the government. Because no matter what you say, wherever you go, that is the only style of governance that can bring people together. And we are a coalition government. Coalition governments are not always easy. There are a lot of challenges. But those that are there, those countries which have seen coalition governments have seen very good progress. And some have adopted that as a permanent feature of their democracies. So everyone in the government believes that that is the approach. So let me just begin by saying that the coalition government is strong, despite the malicious rumor that might be spreading in some quarters by some people. We have a very clear vision about what we need to do to move this country forward. And we have made good of that by operationalizing that philosophy. We started by holding one of the most successful economic summits. And part of the reason why I'm here to talk to you is because I know some of you couldn't make it. We had to stop hundreds of people from coming. People wanted to come, but we didn't have, the response was so overwhelming. It was absolutely overwhelming. And therefore, I think it is important for us to make this trip to the West to meet people like yourselves. I've met Fiji Airways management staff today, Hotel and Tourism Association. We had a very good turnout at the Civic Center. We started with sugarcane farmers in Lomoai. And since we've come into government, we have seen or felt this sense of freedom, sense of confidence, sense of exuberance amongst a large cross-section of our people, investors, international donors, partners. I've been to 2 meetings, World Bank and ADB. We've had several meetings with ministers from big countries, including India. And I think the expectation of the new government from the international partners is quite positive. They actually feel that we can do business quite openly and in a way that everybody feels part of the shared Indo-Pacific strategy that now these countries are talking about. So that's the global scene. That's the sense of confidence. Good news, and then I'll tell you the bad news. Good news is that in the last 5 months, we have seen a rebound of the economy, which was there in 2022. Some steps taken by the previous government in terms of dealing with COVID, appreciated, built on, particularly for the tourism industry. And our view is the things that are working, laws that are working, ain't be broken. If something is working, let it work. And we will build on that. So that's one other important thing that we have decided. But the overall economic forecast and growth is very positive. Tourism is almost 100% to pre-COVID levels. The banks are telling us it's almost $1 billion in terms of loan approval. The uptake is a bit slow. Disbursements might be slow. There's a wait and see, a little bit of wait and see because of the budget. And so the signs are very positive. The Reserve Bank has obviously revised the growth forecast from 6.3% to a conservative more than 8%. I say conservative because the expectation is that the growth this year will be higher than what's being revised now and projected by the Reserve Bank. Employment growth is very strong. Remittances are holding on. First 3 months, first quarter was more than 300 million. Extrapolate that 4 quarters, you're looking at more than $1.2, $1.3 billion in remittances. Consumption is holding on. So the signs are very positive. On the investment front, we can see a renewed interest. We will be announcing some major players in the investment plans in the area of communication, ensuring that the communication infrastructure that we have, which we did, I mean the cable, the lending bases are already congested. So we have a major player which is going to invest in that. We are almost concluding the discussion and will be signing this major project, close to $90 million project for Banua Levu, called Tourism Development Project, which will include components such as upgrade of the Sub-Sabu Airport, Lambasa Airport, and development of the infrastructure, communication and others, Sub-Sabu Lambasa corridor. And that is going to be linked to other sectors of the economy. In terms of the budget, now let me come to the challenges. Everybody knows, and it's not just the impact of COVID. I mean, we have to be honest. The World Bank report is pretty honest report. Bad news, they are making all kinds of recommendations, but it's based on the state of the economy that we have now. Partly as a result of the impact of COVID, but partly as a result of what happened before COVID, in terms of our debt, in terms of our expenditure. So we have that challenge. But we are acutely aware that we need to balance what we do in this budget. We want to ensure that if we collect more revenue, we spend as well. Because the infrastructure deficit, whether it's water, whether it's roads, whether it's our health, is huge deficit. Huge wastage that took place. That's a fact. I don't want to go back to the past, but that is where we are starting, and that is why it's important to state that upfront. So there are a couple of pillars on which we are addressing the economic strategy. One is to make sure that we do not disrupt the recovery that is taking place by putting out tax policies or expenditure policies or borrowing policies which burden everyone, including the businesses. So that's the number one principle that we are adopting. Second, we want to make sure that whatever tax policies, expenditure policies we put in is balanced, it looks after the people, as well as supports government's revenue strategy so that we can put that money into the infrastructure that is needed, which will have an impact on how businesses do, because the infrastructure is very important. So that's the second approach. The third is we want to make sure that we look after our people. And all these rumors about, people will lose their social welfare, students will start paying fees again, something's going to happen. All these rumors are unfounded, lies that some people want to still propagate. But that's not distracting us from formulating a budget that will provide that balance. We have appointed a fiscal review committee which has done a very good job. We've got the draft report. Not everything that they are recommending, that the World Bank is recommending, will be taken on board by government. Of course, we will decide at the end of the day what is best in the current circumstances and how we can put the economy, the policies back on a trajectory that gives confidence to people like yourselves and the general public as well. So that's the principle on which the budget is being formulated. We also want to make sure that we don't bring surprises. And that's why some of the discussions we've had, of course, some people jumped the gun and said 15% VAT has already been implemented, including one former politician. But that's okay. I think the debate about various policies is healthy. People have argued about different things, and we appreciate that. And we welcome criticism, welcome alternatives, welcome specific views on specific policies. And that's why when the Fiscal Review Committee comes out, when the World Bank report came out, it provided you with an opportunity to look at the options of where we are. Because if we don't deal with some of the issues now, you look at water infrastructure in Suba, we sympathize with the people. For 20 years, we haven't invested anything in the pipes. The water leakage, the revenue water, 50% is wasted, leaks out of the system. Biria water project, which was initiated by the previous government, which was a good thing. And when that comes on board, it will solve some problem, but it will also take a time before that itself is. So these are huge problems. The health sector is, as I said when I was in opposition, never in the history of Fiji we've had such bad health services in the country. And that still remains. We are focusing on maintenance, making sure that basic facilities are available. Some of it is already started, and we want to build it into the health budget and ensure that we... Good news is the Indian government, the Prime Minister of India recently, together with our Honorable Prime Minister, announced a major project, a 100-bed specialty hospital, and that's only first phase. And that's going to get off the ground pretty soon. And this is a hospital that the Indian government, through grant, will build and bring in specialist equipment and run it until such time that we are able to build capacity and get things done, because health is very important. Final challenge that we have, and this is part of the global adjustment, restructuring post-COVID in terms of the labor market. There are a lot of things that have happened, pent-up demand in most parts of the world for projects that were stalled. Suddenly there is this huge uptake. There is a need for labor. Labor market itself has changed. People are staying home, getting used to staying home. Some people don't want to go back to work. So there is a global restructuring within the labor market. Australia and New Zealand, of course, went through this pent-up demand, this huge spending in the infrastructure, and obviously they're taking away a lot of our people, including people at the lower level. So we have recognized that when we know what's happening. So immediately what we've done, we've allocated some funding for quick training, competency-based training, so that we can train people like carpenters, painters, drivers in a short period of time, on work, on study. We want to bring back the apprenticeship scheme. The TVET training in this country has been a disaster over the last 10 years. The set up technical colleges, we put in more than $20 million, went down the drain. None of them are working. All dilapidated. We want to bring back, we are looking at the 1% levy that went to the accident compensation and other areas where employers were using that money to train the people. We want to bring that back. It's on the table in the discussion on the budget. And we want to work with the businesses to ensure that we're able to train enough people. We can't stop people from going. And that's not the only thing that will solve the problem. So we are open to immigration. We are reviewing the immigration laws. Last cabinet meeting, the government has already decided that our people who were born here, descendants of those who were born here, they can come back to Fiji. They don't need a permit, they don't need a visa. Whatever passport they hold, they can come back. And we are also reviewing the immigration laws, the stupid law about 15 years for people to come to Fiji and get citizenship. Who wants to come into a country behind every investment, behind the money that people bring are people? Sometimes investors move in, they move with their family, children, they want to come and live here and be part of the country. But if they know that they need to stay there for 15 years to be eligible for a citizenship, why bother? When every other country around the world gives you citizenship in 5 years, Australia, US, Canada, UK, and many others. So we want to review and change some of those stupid laws that were brought in without much thought and understanding. Of course, we have repealed the media law. Media is much more free now. There's much more discussion. And we feel that in a democracy, that's important. If you don't have freedom, you can't prosper as an economy. You might do it for a while, but in the long run, that's what happens. Final thing before I stop, and that is about managing our expenditure. My view is we've spent millions of dollars and we haven't got value for money. There has been massive wastage of funds, taxpayer funds, or borrowed funds, and we haven't had the value for money. And we are trying to make sure that, when I talk about wastage, I'm talking about hundreds of millions of dollars. I'm not talking about $500,000 for Girimit celebration or economic summit or Ratu Sukuna Day that some people, jumped on the bandwagon. We're talking about expenditure that goes to waste. We paid $400 million. We still have some balance to pay as film rebates. They were not necessarily rebates, they were taxpayer funds given as subsidy. We've reviewed that. And there are many other examples. So all I want to do is assure all of you and thank you for your confidence in the country, in the way in which we have received support from a wide cross-section of the society, economic sectors, and we want to make sure that we do good. We won't be able to do everything. Not everything will turn up right. There will be mistakes. Every government makes mistakes. But when we do, we will admit that we made mistakes as a government and that we will work towards, making sure that we don't repeat some of those. So that's our philosophy under which and I'd be very pleased to hear your views on the budget. I know there are a lot of issues. If there are specific issues, I'm sure the staff will take some note. We may not be able to do everything in this budget, but certainly there are issues that we will keep in mind and take it forward. Thank you. Naka.
I think the general feeling is that you have to increase revenue, right? Because we need money. Without money, we can't do anything. So the thing that I want to say is that if you could have a flat rate instead of 9%, 15% and all that, our humble request is if you could make it one flat rate. Makes life so much easier to do business. That's my request.
I used to teach public finance in the university, and I used to tell my students there are 5 principles of a good tax system, and one of them was administrative simplicity, ease of implementing a tax system. VAT has a history. Until 2016, the VAT was 15%. There was no 0 rate, there was no 9. There was a politician in 2014 called Biman Prasad, who talked about reducing VAT from 15 to 10%. Then 2016, it was reduced from 15 to 9%. And then following COVID, it was changed further. It then went back to 0 for basic food items, 21 items, and then 9% and 15%. So it's been around 15 and below. So I agree with you. We are looking at all the options. We feel that the 3 rates are a big distortion. It's not economically efficient, administratively cumbersome, and so we are looking at what is the best combination. And we want to weigh it against how, if we go by the route to have a single rate, then we ought to look at how we can look at in terms of helping the poor, those who are below poverty, and maybe on the margins of poverty. There are always about 10 to 15% of people on the margins of poverty. So, if you do a policy, you could actually put all that 15% below poverty, or you could put them a little up and they survive. And it's also important because consumption, to a large extent comes from that category of people as well. So we are looking at all the numbers, the sums on revenue, how it will affect, and all these rumors about social welfare will be taken away, bus fare will be taken away. We've decided to get rid of that $613 million debt that students owe. And the reason why we want to abolish that or take that burden away, because the students are not paying anyway. Out of the 613 million or exact amount that is owed, we are collecting on average about 5 to 7 million a year. So the revenue lost to government would be around 5 to 7 or $8 million a year. But the burden on some of the poor students of that debt and parents is huge. When we came into government, we realized that people needed help. People were still transitioning to income, to jobs after loss of COVID income and jobs. So we made sure that we provided $50 million. We looked at the budget. I knew there were areas where it was not going to be spent or it was going to be wasted. We brought $50 million and gave it to the students. We gave $200 each to 214,000 students from preschool to high school to make sure that they had an ease of entry into the school. And all the information that we got throughout the country showed that it was used for the right purpose. It didn't go into the nightclubs or bars. People bought bags, stationery, books, uniform, shoes, and it was very much appreciated. So we understand, the imperatives of looking after our people and making sure that there is enough spending. So it's a difficult question, Anita, and I think you're absolutely right. We want to make it administratively simple. There are other taxes that we are looking at. I don't think a lot of businesses would mind paying slightly higher corporate tax, but not be burdened by this huge transaction cost on different types of taxes all over the place. So we are looking at all that, and I think the Fiscal Review Committee has made some very good suggestions. Not all of them would be possible in the budget, but we have a very clear view of what we are going to do. And if we can't have a single rate, we will certainly, I can tell you this, we are certainly not going to have 3 rates. That is something that I can reveal to you now.
Once again, Honorable Minister, we welcome you to Nadi and we look forward to see you more often. I would like to introduce myself. My name is Prem Chandra and I am ex-bank officer. And I'm a Nadi man. I'm born in Nadi, I'm staying in Nadi. I have got one question to ask and maybe few suggestions as far as economy of the country. As everyone is looking for a budget now, we are waiting for it. And I strongly believe that with your background knowledge as an economist, you will definitely present us a good budget that all the life of people, everyone in Fiji will benefit out of it. Okay, my question is, everybody is scared with this about the overseas borrowing. What is the country's, level or the power of overseas borrowing? There may be a certain limit, if I'm not wrong. Like as I had a banking knowledge, I know that when we used to give the loan, there are certain limit that we can give certain percent of loan to certain organization. So as a country whole, the borrowing level is up to what level and what does it depend? Suppose the World Bank gives us a loan, on what basis and what amount we can borrow? So at the moment, sorry to say that previous government has borrowed a lot of money and our debt level is very, very high. And no one is looking forward to our debt to go even higher. So probably you will be able to explain this better. We would like to know that. And second thing about the number of vehicles on the road. That is causing a lot of problem, the traffic jams. And I don't think we have adequate roads at the moment to cater all these vehicles. And I understand to provide the roads is a long-term solution. So I just have one suggestion for a short-term solution that we place a quota system on import vehicles. And of course, you might think that the country will lose the revenue with the duties. But I say no, you can be doing a better way. Suppose, say we are importing 2,000 vehicles a year. By say average of $8,000, say duty it will cost, the revenue will be of $16 million. Okay, suppose we increase the duty to $10,000 and you will get the same revenue and the number of vehicles will be reduced by 400. So that will ease some problem on the roads. And thirdly, just to build our economy, I think we were enjoying plenty free rides with the previous government. For example, people were not paying the taxi-based fees and carrier-based fees and few other fees. And I think people can afford to pay all those fees now at the moment. I would appreciate if you could implement those fees and at a reasonable amount so that people can pay without any problem. Thank you, sir.
Thank you for the question and some very useful suggestions, especially I'll come to that. Let me just explain to you, the debt to GDP ratio is usually the indicator that economists, lending institutions like World Bank, IMF, ADB, benchmark, countries' debt to GDP ratio. In other words, how much is your debt as a percentage of your total output in an economy, which is the GDP. So right now, it's more than 80%. And a reasonable level of debt to GDP ratio is around 45 to 50%. And what that means is, when you have a very high level of debt, it does have, implications on other sectors of the economy, because somebody has to pay at the end of the day. You have to pay interest, even if the loan is very concessional. Some of the loans that we've got is very concessional. It's not smart borrowing. It just is that some of these international institutions post-COVID were making available finance which is concessional. So IDA, International Development Assistance framework of the World Bank, provides certain countries with a loan which is concessional. For example, repayments may not start straight away. It may start in 10 years or 20 years. The interest rate could be very small. So these are different combinations of borrowing that countries can access. I was in the recent World Bank meeting in Washington and Korea for the ADB meeting, and one of the things that I was arguing is that these institutions ought to demarcate, more vulnerable economies like, Fiji and the Pacific, where, infrastructure damage or infrastructure resilience requires a lot of investment because of impact of climate change. But what has happened is we now have to make sure, and we are telling the World Bank and the IMF and ADB that we must have a fiscal strategy so that over a longer period of time in the future, we are able to consistently reduce that ratio of debt to GDP. So there are three things that we'll have to do. One is we have to make sure that the economy keeps on growing. But just the economy keep growing is not the only solution to reduce debt. Because if the economy grows at an average of 5%, and if we continue to spend the same amount of money, and we don't collect the revenue, then we will not be able to reduce the debt level and the debt to GDP ratio. So we will have to adopt a three-pronged approach. And the fiscal strategy that I presented to Parliament, I've said, we must keep our deficit level around 4.5 or a little more than that of GDP. This is how much we should collect in our revenue. This is how much we should spend. This is how much we should look at spending in the infrastructure. So there has to be a very fine balance. And right now, if I say that we're going to reduce the debt level down to 50% of GDP, in other words, from $9 billion to $4.5 billion in 5 years, I'd be lying. I think if it'll take, given what we have, infrastructure deficit, in water, roads, other areas, it'll take probably 10 to 15 years to bring debt to GDP ratio down to almost 50%. So that's fundamentally an important consideration. So what, as a government, and I'm talking about future governments, if there's another government that comes after us, after 4 years, we want to set a trajectory, a foundation, so that the next government can build onto it, that we can take it down over a period of time. But we need growth, We need to manage our expenditure carefully. We need to also look after our people. So the three approach will have to be together. And it's not going to be easy. It's going to be a huge challenge to find the best balance, because as part of a government, there are different challenges, different expectations of our people. And our people are used to a lot of things already in 16 years. So, we have to manage those expectations as well. Coming back to, I usually don't like quota system in anything, because that itself is imposing. I believe that incentives, whether it's tax, as you said, if you raise the duty, we may slow down the number of vehicles. We may get people to look at alternative usage. Drive only in the weekend, catch a bus, our public transport system. So these are all options that can be incentivized as a result of the tax system, which is the duty. But that's something that we haven't decided. That's on the table in the budget discussions. We'll be looking at all the figures, revenue sources, and if we feel that we need to raise duty on luxury cars again, luxury goods, or second-hand vehicles, we will consider that. And as I said, at the end of the day, somebody has to pay. I mean, we've got a debt level, we've got expenditure level, we've got the imperatives of spending. We need to find money. Combination of borrowing, we may still have to borrow. While we are at that level, we're trying to bring it down, but we're trying to do two other things. We still have to borrow some to be able to, so that the GDP grows, the debt to GDP ratio comes down over a period of time gradually. So that's the strategy that we put in place. And I've presented this strategy to Parliament already.
Everywhere I go, I've been told, or the highlight of the meeting is brain drain. I just came back last night from Sydney, and I was with Mr. Modi in Sydney, not personally, but into the crowd. And there was a place by the name of Harris Park. There are so many people that he convinced Harris Park to do India. My subject is brain drain. What is the reason of having brain drain from Fiji Islands to the other part of the world? There is a very small solution to it, provide our ministers, our people who look at our country, look deep into it. I promise you that this country will be back like Hawaii, like other countries which we love to go. It's a small security, it's a small roof over the family which we are looking forward for. My grandfather came into this country in 1896. He started his business as a transport owner. Till today I'm doing it. And I'm sure my children will be doing it. I got 4 boys, they are on air pilots and few other things, and engineer. And our vision is to transport people, either by air or by road. But when we transport them, we wonder, why are you leaving country? The answer is, we have got no security for our family, for our people, which is a piece of land. Just a small piece of land which we could say, this is a piece of land, we are taking title to the bank, we want to build a house to save Hurricane Winston, to save fire, to save time aid, to save few other problems we are facing in this country. Nobody have looked, nobody have spoken, nobody have ever told me about it. Mr. Khan, you do this, you'll be safe, or you not do that, we'll look after you. I've been told that there is a 99 years lease given to the people who want to build a house. I spent $496,000. I built a house on Aiteuki land. For 11.5 years, I'm trying to get a title. Till today, I'm sitting here without it. So please, listen to our voice. I bet you, I know so many thousand people, they love Fiji Islands. They want to come and spend here. They want to have their graveyard here. They want to be with their forefathers, to be cremated here. But unfortunately, no idea. And secondly, as you said about brain drain, I've imported maybe how many people from Bangladesh to drive my buses, my truck, my bulldozers, my excavator, and few other things. But still not enough. We asked the boys who gone back, say, what are you going to do for us? They are in small squatters. They make few dollars, they give it where they're supposed to be spending it. Imagine, more or less, according to our counting, there are more than 30,000 people within a year have migrated from Fiji. Just looking for future, for a bright future. And the bright future is for the children, it's for a roof. I'm one of them. I got Mr. Singh beside me. He came and he's here for the last 4 or 5 years trying to set that up as well. Nothing is happening. He's a greatest farmer. He harvests about 1.5 tons of bindi, export overseas. But he got no security about his land. Thank you very much, sir, for listening.
Just to respond to you, I think there are some good issues you've raised, but I think you have also exaggerated the problem to an extent, which lays the whole issue of migration and, insecurity on one single factor, which is not quite true. There are various issues with respect to land. I'm aware there are people who are living in the squatter settlement. There are issues about agreement to lease. There are issues about, informal settlements. But there are processes such as, if you get a 99-year ETOK Land Trust Act lease, that lease is pretty secure. You can build your house, you can mortgage it, you can sell it. Same with state lease, same with, of course, freehold land category is different, there's a small percentage of that. So, it is an issue. It is an issue in many countries. The migration issue and security issues, yes, there is an element of that. There is also a lot of fear, unnecessarily created by those who would like to believe that this is a problem. I mean, we've lived in this country for 144 years. Of course, we understand there have been issues, 87, 2000, 2006. Those who were in, power over the last 16 years, the Prime Minister himself was the chair of the ITL-TV board. You would have expected things to happen. These are difficult issues. And we believe that where there are problems with leases, whether it's agriculture, whether it's a squatter settlement, these are issues that need to be negotiated because we have a structure that is there. So I appreciate what you are saying. And for some people, it has been difficult. It has been difficult. I admit that. And we had some issues raised in Lomowai today. There are issues in every part of the country where, we have land lease issues. So it's not a new problem, but it's also a problem that can be solved, that can be settled through proper negotiation and understanding of where the imperatives are and what sort of incentives we can provide. The issue that we have as a government, we believe that some of these issues can be resolved. We are addressing squatter settlements. We are piloting a public-private partnership project on housing, where we feel that that was initiated by the previous government, and we're taking it on board because we feel that it was a good initiative, something that needs to be tried and see whether that can work. So we are not, as I said before, we are not throwing every idea that was there, because we very strongly believe that every government does something good. But every government's job is to make sure that you leave a system that the next government can build on. And that's what we are trying to do. So I know it's a difficult one. I just want to raise another point that was raised by Prem. And that's about, city rates and all that. Again, you're absolutely right. The first thing that happened is everything was centralized. Town councils were abolished, city councils were abolished. We had, I'm not talking about individuals as administrators, but the system was corrupt. the whole system didn't work because people at the local level, whatever pitfalls you might have had, with elected councillors, it worked because the councillors were accountable to the people who elected them. Same as growers' councillors. Growers are suffering because they didn't have the representatives. There was no linkage at the sector level, at the mill level. Things were settled, quite amicably, during harvesting seasons, planting seasons, and it was done. All that was broken. So we want to bring that level of local governance back, so that basically what is happening now is the government is paying for town councils. A lot of them have become so lazy that they rely on government to fund. Very soon, if we leave it like that, they will ask government to fund the CEOs and everything else, when the services should be available at the local government level. I know most of the people who pay rate are willing to pay rate. They're good citizens. But it's just that the system doesn't allow that. So we've already announced that the town and city council will have the elections. They will run their own administration, and they will collect the rates and other fees and charges that they ought to collect to provide an efficient service to the ratepayers of those towns and cities.
Good evening, sir. I'm Dr. Shakil. I'm a young entrepreneur and ardent health professional. So there's a few things I would like to share with you. I was very honored to be invited to the National Economic Summit, and I did raise the idea. And you mentioned about the health sector, and then the condition our health sector is in the current state. I think this is a bit of a cycle that we need to really fix, sir, because if we do not look after our population, and that also brings me to that point where we were talking about migration, sir. Health previously being one of the most common reasons for migration. And I see a few heads nodding here. And that's really true. And as our population ages, because of better care, people are planning to leave for abroad. Now, when we don't have a productive community or public, we're not going to get much more money. Then that money is not going to be able to sustain the health sector, and that cycle continues. So I proposed for us to have a 1% health tax levy across the board. We're marching towards universal health care, and universal health care in any part of the world is not achieved without taxation. Medicare in Australia has 2% taxes, sir. If we are looking at our taxation system, we need to really consider this. A 1% health levy across the board, regardless of the amount you earn, because then that's your contribution towards the health sector. Now, for example, I'm proposing if you're earning somewhere more than 100,000 and you have a private insurance system, or you go to, for example, Fiji Care or BSP Life, we should be able to subsidize that and say, you give us only 5% of it. So it's 0.5% of it. The 0.5% goes to the government gives you 0.5% off because you get off the government sector, so you're completely privatized now. That way the government wins and you're still providing your 0.5% responsibility to the people. So while talking about the taxation, sir, I also think we need to really look at the tax bracket. While we're looking at the tax bracket, I think Fiji is one of the only countries that provides no taxes for up to 30,000. Now that's a large amount for our country and a small GDP. In New Zealand, I believe, and I stand corrected, you're going to pay 14 cents per every dollar you earn. That's $0 to $10,000, you pay 14%. And in Australia, up to about 18,000, you pay about 19% taxes, if I'm not wrong. So I may be corrected, but there's still a large sum that you pay. And you end up paying up to about 46% in some of these countries, as compared to Fiji, sir. So we may need to, at any point in time, maybe not in the next budget, but sooner or later, reconsider that 30,000 bracket. Because we have a whooping percent of people that are falling under the 30,000 bracket. And if that is the case, we're asking, 450,000 population to look after a 900,000 population? And the rest is by the business sector? So we may need to consider that. So my other plea is to look into digitization. In the National Economic Summit, if I was to summarize into 3 things, we figured out that one, we lack data. To make the right decisions, we lack data. Two, we lack digitization. And three, because of our current state, we need public-private partnership. And if you see the recommendations by almost all of the thematic groups, they were talking about PPPs, PPPs, and PPPs. So digitization is something that is really needed. It's not at our doorstep right now. We are past the phase. We have so many teachers. We say that we lack teachers. There are teachers that are not hired. I have hired them as our receptionist, and then sooner or later, then they got their job after a year or so. So we don't have a digital platform where we could pull in all these teachers to find out if they're hired, not hired, where are they, what are they doing. There's a lot of resources around, but we're not utilizing them as well. So digitization would help us, sir. It's my plea that we look into this in our new budget. Thank you.
I think you hit the nail on the head, with respect to health services, and thank you for articulating, some of those ideas so eloquently. I appreciate that, and I think you're a future leader. You should keep articulating some of these views. Just to add to what you said about the importance of health, I have a niece. She would be on a salary of, I don't know, between her and the husband, they're probably earning more than $180,000 or $190,000. They have two little girls. After the election, 2 months after the election, I met her and she said, I'm now thinking of migrating. And I said, well, is it because I'm in government? Your uncle is now in government? You want to leave? And she said, no. She explained to me that she was trying to leave, or she was considering leaving, because she felt that the health services, she was looking at her daughters, looking at the hospitals she's visited, she thought, this is not a place. I mean, this is like somebody that I know closely telling me that they want to leave because, and the other thing she said was the education system or the quality. But she was more worried about health rather than education. And I agree with you 100%. And this is why, this decision by the Indian government and of course, to set up a specialty hospital, the new hospital in Nadi, we want to make sure that apart from the private facilities, there are public hospitals also step up. And when I look at the budget, sometimes it's good to be in an opposition for a while before you come into government, because you are able to see a lot of the issues. And for 8 years, I've talked about health. I've called for an inquiry. I've said, why it's not about the money. In fact, the budget allocation was always reasonable. It didn't happen. And so we need to step up. It's going to be a huge challenge. So we are looking at a combination of public-private partnership. Your suggestion about, levy, we may not be able to do it in the next budget. On threshold, I can tell you that it's going, see, it's like in economics we say, once you do something, once you offer something, it's like when we say prices are sticky upwards. When prices rise up, it's very hard to bring it down. So it's like the same principle applies when governments give something to the people and people get used to it. It's very difficult to remove it, even though it makes perfect economic, social sense to do it. So we've considered that, but I can tell you, right now that is not something that we are planning to, do that in this budget, because we feel that we are still recovering. We don't want to disrupt the household income or disposable income, whatever it is after FNPF, still a disposable income for that category of people. And we believe that they are the spenders, and it makes sense at this point in time to let it be. But that's something that we can look at in the future. Thank you.
I am a businessman in Nadi since 1976 and a board member of Vivekananda College since 1978 and a board member of Ramakrishna Mission since 1978. And I was the treasurer for Nadi College for a few years. I attended from overdraft to with the good management to where it should be. Coming to back to my point is when Swami Rudranan was there, and the all were not good at academic students. So he started Tibet, something called where you can teach them baking cakes, furniture making, mechanics and other things. We had up to 180 students at Navaidumba. And after a few, it was going good. We used to produce good bakers, good mechanics, with the help of the government. And all of a sudden, at Navaidumba, one of the previous ministers stopped giving all the aids which we are getting. And those students, we had to tell them, please look and go somewhere else. We had about $600,000 to $700,000 of that building there. Is getting rotten. That all the doors are gone, windows are gone, big glasses are there. Nothing is happening. Now we have started that at Vivekananda College and the Swami Vivekananda Technical College, where about 30 to 45 farmers are there. We got our own tractor, whereby we give it to the farmers. We got our own driver who takes it to the farm, plows the land free of charge, and brings the tractor back to the school. Right. But my question to you, sir, what can we do with that giant sitting there with a lot of grasses? And it's a waste of all the funds which were implanted by the businessmen of Nadi and other places. Number two, we got one good medical facilities at Swami Vivekananda College. It is going good. We give about 55 to 80 patients. We see 55 to 80 patients a day by the help of our local business people providing the services. The government was providing us with 2 doctors. All of a sudden stopped. From last October or so, doctor is not coming. Right? And the nurse, we are getting 1 nurse and 2 doctors. If you can look into it, sir, I would very much appreciate to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I think you raised some, on technical colleges. We are going to fund Swami Vivekananda Technical College. I can tell you that in the budget we are already looking at that. See, what happened previously was they tried to set up these technical colleges. We pumped in about $20 million that went down the drain, as you said, and everything collapsed. They removed, apprenticeship, vocational education training from schools, which was a great pathway to feed into a more technical education. You could do a course at a school, and these colleges, these technical setups were available throughout the country. And students would, so if you didn't do very well academically, and I know I put many students, from my village and others, who failed Form 4 or Form 5, you put them into technical colleges, and they have come out with fantastic colors. They've finished that. Then they go to FIT, get stage 1 or stage 2. Many of them have migrated, in the area of plumbing, joinery, mechanical, electrical. Very good flow of training. Now all that was disrupted, and it happened because somebody in government, without consultation, decided, oh, this is what we're gonna do, and it was a big show. All we end up doing was spending taxpayers' money, and everything collapsed. Something that was working was broken. Now we're trying to set that up again and bring apprenticeship, make sure that 1% levy is back to the employers. And it's going to take a while. The damage that was done to technical vocational education as a result of the scholarship that they opened up the doors, before elections. Everybody who qualified for TELs, people who didn't have money, the universities reduced the mark, so people ended up doing degree, which they couldn't do. They piled up debt. They went there for 3 years, collected allowance, failed courses, got out. The debt level is still there. Government has spent the money. This is what happened. So what we're trying to do is to make sure that we rationalize some of these things so that everybody who has a chance to do something in tertiary institutions get the support, get the scholarship. All the loan amount that they were giving, with the same amount of money, we can give scholarships to everybody. But we can direct them into different sectors where they are, you don't want to put somebody in the university who's got only 190 marks out of 400 to go and do a degree in management and accounting. First of all, they would struggle. Secondly, some of them don't complete. And thirdly, if they do complete, after struggling, you can imagine the quality that you will get. So these are issues that we're trying to rationalize, but technical education is going to be our focus in a big way. But it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be fixed in 6 months or a year. It'll take time. And in the meantime, we are reviewing the immigration processes, citizenship clause as well, which they made 15 years, so that there is some ease of, if we need to bring people from outside, there is some, ease of doing that, and in a selective way that could be helpful to the employers and the economy.
Good evening, Deputy Prime Minister. Just very quickly, I thought I'll bring it back to the budget topic. I think as far as my personal experience goes, obviously being a lawyer and all of that, we deal with a lot of property transactions. Now, I know from your opening address, you're not very fond of the word rumor or rumors, but apparently Coconut Wireless has it that there's some talk of maybe reinstating or bringing back the Stamp Duties Act. So I think I just wanted to know, okay, well, if that's a quick answer, but basically what I was trying to address was that I think there were two extremes that happened. We had stamp duties at reasonable and fair levels, and then I think the former government then abolished it completely. And it's something that you just said earlier in one of your answers to one of the questionnaires that came from the floor, was that when you remove something completely, you get spoiled. And now we are spoiled. It's set a bad precedent. But what happened at the time when the government had increased stamp duties, so we went from, I believe, 3% to 10% for foreigners, it had at least from our point of view, it had a detrimental effect on the market. Now, I understand there were some reasonings behind it, one of them being that they were trying to curb the amount of land or properties that a foreigner could purchase that was being sort of hindering locals from buying those. But remember, there were areas allocated where foreigners could buy and where they were restricted. And as far as abolishing stamp duty completely during COVID times by the former government, I think that was a big disaster as well, because I think we had more concerns than buying properties at the time of COVID. So the people who could buy it bought it anyway. And that's all it served. It served the people who could have afforded these things. So my plea simply is that if we are going to bring that back, make it fair and reasonable, don't discriminate between foreigners and locals. And remember, the foreigners, the locals were protected in any event under the former Stamp Duties Act, because just like any taxes in the country, we had exemptions. So poor people, first home buyers, these people could get exemptions for that. So if it does come back, I ask that maybe it be reasonable and fair, not 10%, 5% on mortgages, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. I could not have put it in a better way that you have done. So thank you. And I agree with you 110%. You know, when you make policies, that's why we are going to take time, and we will review some of these things carefully. You know, some were done during COVID, so we're trying to understand why it was done. Some we could not rationalize, you know, myself, you know, at that point in time, you know, when I was in the opposition. But as you said quite rightly, the principles behind changing it, I mean, one of the things that I could never understand, I mean, it's like the Americans complaining about the Japanese in the 1980s when the Japanese were buying all these properties in the US. And there was this thing, oh, you know, Japanese are buying, and then suddenly, you know, Japanese will take over the US. But what happened over the years, I mean, it's not something that you're going to carry on your soldier and take it away in a plane or in a boat, you know, if you buy a property. You know, there is the gestation period, you know, things stabilize, you know, even, so, you know, somebody buying property, I mean, that law, Land Sales Act, you know, where foreigners were required to invest in 2 years, it was a stupid decision. I mean, you know, why would you want to do that? So we're going to, that's one of the things that we're going to change in the budget, I can tell you that, you know, on the agenda. So that may help, you know, spur, you know, a bit of sale as well. But I agree with you 110%. And we may consider that not this year, but maybe the following year. But, and the reason why I'm saying this is we want certainty. So, you know, like you may interpret what I'm saying now. Some of you might decide, okay, you know, stamp duty might come the following budget. It's a good thing. So, you know, you make decisions. The expectation of what happens in the future determines what people do today. And in economics, it's very important not to have false expectations, not to have secrets, but to put out an agenda which people understand and plan in a better way.
My name is David Jameson. I have a yachting business here in Denarau for the last 21 years. I'd just like to say first what a great idea lowering the citizenship level is. I know from my own perspective that there's no way I would still be here if my children weren't allowed to have some status in the country in which they're being brought up. My other question is, as you know, yachts, divers, snorkelers, we're all using our marine resources. And I note that, that there's going to be some changes in the surfing decree, which, as we all know, was implemented and had ripple effects throughout the country. I'm absolutely in favor of every resource owner being properly recompensed for any usage of their resources. But would you kindly share some insights on how, post this decree, how things would pan out? Thank you.
As soon as you said yacht, I figured out it'll be a question about the Surfing Decree or the Surfing Act. A lot of these decrees became Act. So, although the announcement has been made that it will be reviewed or will be changed, what we propose, and I've said this, it was raised in a meeting with the Fiji Hotel and Tourism Association meeting as well. We are saying that there will be thorough consultation. It will not be a rush decision. If there isn't going to be any change, it will be done through a proper consultation with people like yourselves and the industry, tourism industry in particular, and with the landowners, with the Golingoli owners, to make sure, and as I said before, in response to earlier gentlemen, who put it as if, everybody, you couldn't own anything in this country, which is not true, which is an exaggeration. There are issues of land leases, there are issues about Golingoli, there are issues about, issues about, what are the appropriate commensurate benefits that landowners get, as any resource owner would. So all I can say to you at this point is I can assure you that there will be a thorough consultation before any change is made. And we believe that we should not change things just for the sake of changing. If the laws that were made by the previous government make sense, it is good, why change it? That's the view that I have personally, and that's the view that a lot of people in government have, and we want to make sure that we only change things if it needs to, if it is necessary, if it was not right, if the circumstances has changed. And that can only come through consultation, because what we heard over the years was laws, pop in the morning and debated in the afternoon or passed the next day without proper consultation. And once you consult, you see different points of views. Because sometimes you think, you're going to change law and make this law, the unintended consequences of a law can be quite devastating. So, and a lot of laws were made to fix incidences. If somebody says, people are bringing in this stuff, we must change the law. Instead of addressing the process, instead of addressing how people are doing the work, you go and change the law to address that. Changing the law, if the process is not right, doesn't do anything. So we take that view very strongly, and we will consult widely on that.